Art. So when did you first meet Francis? That's the biggest thing. When did you first meet him?
I guess I first met Francis when I was growing up around the track
Mm.
in at EPR, and a lot of us hung around together. And then Francis would come over to race on the Saturdays and Wednesday nights when they held the cards from PEI. And I guess it was just the fact that when he pulled in with the big truck with the wooden back on it and unloaded horses, and as kids we were curious as to who was coming in going, and Francis was just he was coming from the island, and he was just a big player then, so everybody wanted to know who Francis was.
Yeah, definitely. So that would have been like early '70s. And we're not gonna go by how old you are.
Yeah, that was in the 70s for sure.
Yeah.
And I can't be exactly sure like when, but I just remember like being a younger teenager there at the track when I started paying attention like to who Francis was, and I just remember the snowstorms and things that we had back then, and regardless of what kind of weather it was, we would race.
Yeah.
And it kind of like always amazed me how Francis would arrive from PEI and travel on a boat and everything to get there. And then he had a full barn stable in St. John with Wally McGuinness. And, it was just amazing how this man would come and race. And it just, amazed me as a youngster around the track.
Yeah, that's pretty big work ethic, definitely on Francis's part. Because I know, I think I have a picture. I'm going to show it on the podcast. Well, when people hear
Yeah.
this, will be recorded. But they probably already seen it. Francis, he didn't wear gloves when he raced.
No, he didn't.
Which,
No.
that's
And
crazy.
Francis's hands that's another thing I remember as a young girl. Francis's hands were massive, like,
Yeah.
and another thing, when it was storming or we had those big storms and it was so cold, and as a youngster then, I don't remember the cold,
Yeah.
but I never remember Francis complaining about the cold on his hands, or ever, saying that, oh, it's too cold to race or whatever, because we had some major storms and that man would still come and still race. And it was just like, it was amazing to watch.
Yeah, no, like I said, I was too young, but I've gone through the archives and I've seen like looking at like 74, 75, like just a random race day. And you see Francis like not 8 times, but you see him about easily 3 or 4 wins a day. I mean, he was
Oh yes.
dominant. He was
and
dominant.
and he was pretty much in every race, because I mean, Wally McGuinness held a racing stable there for him with 14 horses, and that barn was full, and Francis would bring another truckload of horses
Wow.
along with, and all of his followers. Francis was like the leader,
Mm.
and he would bring the McPhees and the McPhails and Orville Willis, and all those people would truck in with their big trucks with the wooden backs on, and those were full of horses, and the horses would get off, and it was just like a normal day, even though there was storms or whatever. The show went on.
And I think just to add to that, I mean, we talk about how EPR was such a big deal in the '70s. We should give
Oh,
Francis a lot of credit for that, because obviously with him bringing all them horses and all them guys from the island made a huge deal for EPR.
yes, Francis was a main ingredient to the success of EPR back in the 70s, because of the full fields. The bet was up, the dry dock was in force at that time, and a lot of the grandstand was full, and the show was full of horses and full of people from the island, and he was like the leader. They
Mm-hmm.
followed him, and he was very modest about that. Like, he wasn't a man that would come and put on a show and be a showboat person. He was very reserved and very patient. And I remember that, he was never came off the track in a mad state at somebody. He just kind of, had patience and dealt with it on the track and left things on the track. And he was never, he was so professional and for his time, in that time, everybody was racing in that, but, Francis just came and he was just like a normal person. Although he had major wins and, had multiple horses and a big stable, and he was just a modest person.
So do you remember, because you said you were probably once you went to work for Francis, you would have been in your early 20s, would you say? Did he give you some good advice?
No, I was in my early teens then.
Oh, okay.
And my first summer job at the track, I'm sure I did paddocks and stuff before that, but I took on a summer job with Francis as cleaning stalls, and it was my first paying job that I would say I worked all week at the racetrack, and it was in Wally McGinnis's barn. I worked for Francis. I did 14 stalls every day, and I made $50 a week for doing that. And those stalls were on straw, I must add.
Yeah.
But, when Francis came on Saturday, he would pay everybody. And when I got that $50, he would always pay me with a $50 bill. And when he paid me with that, it was like I won the lottery or something, because it just, now when I look back at it, it was a lot of work for $50. But you know what? I was part of that team, and being part of Francis's team was really something to be proud of at that time, because he really ruled the roost at EPR.
Yeah, definitely. Did he ever give you advice as a kid? I know Francis wasn't really one to do a whole lot of talking. Obviously,
he wasn't one to do a lot of talking, but he would always watch over us kids, and tell us what horses to be careful of and stuff. And there was one horse in that barn, Basilius. He had a stall at the front, and I remember one time he was a stallion, but they never took the halter off that horse, and they even put a muzzle on him to go to the paddock. And this was a really bad horse. And Francis always, as Wally McGinnis always said, told us never to go in that stall. He protected us from horses that were bad. And I remember that horse. One time Francis was coming out of that stall, and the horse bit Francis on the back, and he really bit Francis. And Francis never turned around and was mad at the horse or anything. He just basically accepted the fact that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he always made a point to tell us to be careful of certain horses. And, he, like I say, he was just a man of not many words, but he always seemed to be thinking, he was just in a zone of his own type of thing.
And that's probably why, his success came from a lot of reasons, but definitely would be why that he was because he was always focused, right? Very focused driver.
Very focused. And he must have been a very good judge of character, because Wally McGinnis ran that stable in St. John, and I can tell you there was nothing out of place. Anything Francis wanted done, Wally McGinnis did, and he had Gary McQuaid and Brian Johnson working at that time, and those people just, they really respected Francis, because he worked with them. He didn't work and tell them, you're doing this, you're doing this. He was one that worked with them and alongside of them, and they totally respected Francis for that.
Yeah, I actually know Brian's daughter, Kendra. I've known her for years, I was talking to her about that before. And I knew that her father worked for Francis, because she told me that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm very fascinated by Francis, and I don't want to bring up the end, because that's no need for that in this situation. But it's very fast. I love hearing the stories. Especially the 70s. But Francis was always that mysterious figure to me, because I never got to see him race. And actually, when you do watch the podcast, I have a few of his races that Jerry McCabe let me use, which is really neat. And I might have one on the 8mm, but I'm not 100% sure if it's Francis or not. So I'm not going to take my shot at it. But
the other thing I want to mention about Francis is on Saturdays when he did show up, it was always he would always come to me in the barn and say, "Would you go get me a plug of club?" And so a plug of club was a club of tobacco, and chewing tobacco. So I had to run over to Dot's lunch, and I was always the messenger to go get that. But through the years at EPR, a lot of the younger people growing up there were always called on to go get the plug of club. And, nowadays people might not know what that is, but Francis always chewed tobacco. And, he was always, like you said before, he was, did he give us any encouragement and things? But one storm I do remember, Francis was, like I say, always looking out for us kids around. And he always encouraged kids, he never discouraged us from working with the horses and stuff. He really liked that part of it. And we were all standing up on this platform in the paddock along the fence, and we were watching a race in a snowstorm, and the gates on the wings on the gate wouldn't close. Mm-hmm. So about four of us younger people were standing there, and Francis was standing beside us. And the size of Francis, like a gentle giant, really. And he was standing along the fence beside us, and the wing came right along the top of the fence, and it would have taken us right out if he hadn't have taken his big arm and just reached out and threw four of us right in the snowbank behind us. And I'll never forget that because it was kind of a traumatic thing. We were wondering what he was doing, but then we realized what he did, and he probably saved our lives that night,
Yeah, geez, that's crazy. I don't want to laugh at it. It's funny, but I mean, he definitely is probably a lot of injury because, I mean, them things aren't going slow.
No, but he was, like I say, he was like, he was focused and always watch in the groove, to watch, and always knew what was going on around him. And another Macca, that horse that you had spoke about on one of your podcasts before, I used to take care of another Macca, and I don't mean to be brazen or cocky about it, but when Francis drove another Macca in the top class every week, I could almost I would put my water bucket and my halter and my blanket in the test barn because I knew I was going in there.
Nice. Oh.
And you knew you were going to win with another Macca and Francis. He had a long run with that horse at EPR.
Yeah, Wally Hennessy brought another Macca up, and he brought up Francis quickly in the podcast. I actually read a quote from Wally about Francis saying, basically, he was the best. Like, coming from Wally, said that he was like the Michael. What do you call him? He called him like the Michael Jordan of harness racing, almost. Which, I mean, I got that's.
And and I as I got older, and I watch, and I'm involved in racing now and stuff, and I realize what impact Francis had on racing at that time, and I often wonder if Francis was still here with us, how racing would be. And I'm sure it would be in a better state than it is right now at EPR.
Yeah.
And because he was definitely a main ingredient there for the success at that time, and I'm sure he still would have been involved and kept things going.
I know he won the, I think I probably talk about it like once I get the podcast started up, but he won Driver of the Year in 76, 77, 78, I think it was.
Oh, yes, and they always recognize the drivers there. Doug Caldwell did a great job at that, and he always presented them trophies down in front of the grandstand. The grandstand was always full of people, and he, it was a big deal back then to be a top driver like that. But Francis worked hard. He came every Wednesday and Saturday and put a lot of miles on to do that, and he had the horses, and he had the people behind him and the team behind him. And he has a great family too. Barb, his wife, I had the pleasure of meeting Barb, after I got older, and I remained friends with Lee and Beverly, and they're active in harness racing, and they're just a wonderful family.
And it's good to see his legacy still coming. like still there. Like in the island when they do the Francis was the top driver of the Old Home Week with Francis.
Yes.
That award,
yes.
which is really nice. It is really nice
yes.
that they do that. It's because I mean he's a big part, and it's very nice that they acknowledge the past because that's a huge part of history and where it all came from. I mean, really.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Anything else you want to add there, Dawn? You can go ahead. I just,
no, I just wanted to mention, like you say about his hands and not wearing the gloves, and no, the Plug It Club was something I remembered, and the $50 bill was, and he always paid everybody on Saturdays when he came. And like I say, it was fun back then, and it was a lot of work. The whole stable would be racing on a Saturday.
Yeah.
You'd be having the horses already in their stalls, for hours waiting to go race. But it was hard work, but it was fun, and it didn't seem like work because we were all having so much fun together.
It was worth it too. I mean, if you look back, I always talk about the 70s. I mean. 77, 78. I was actually at Bruce Maxwell's a few nights ago, just chatting up with him because he was going down a couple times every couple weeks. And like for you guys to be getting them horses right, and then going out and like, for me, I don't know, like to be behind the scenes and then you go out and see all the people watching. It's almost like, is it gratifying? Is that what I'm trying to look at? Like you're kind of gratified.
It really is. Like you don't get to be in the grandstand a lot because you're always the one putting the show on.
Yeah.
But to be in the winner's circle is very gratifying, and just to be part of a team that's successful is really gratifying too. When your stable does good, like everybody's happy, and it's just the success that everybody feeds off of, and it keeps you coming back for more. Really,
definitely. I remember just being a kid, me sneaking. Well, I guess I wasn't really sneaking to the barns. I thought I was, but they all knew I was going over there. It was my little, it was like the unwritten, don't go to the barns, I promise I won't. And then I would go, and my mother knew 90% of the people over there, so I'm pretty sure they all knew I was there. But yeah, I get it. It's kind of, the thing about that stuff is, I mean, not really go off France, but the harness racing thing, it's in your blood. I mean, it's in my blood.
Oh, it definitely is. And like, I used to be at the grandstand, as a younger child, hanging out with Lisa and your cousin Lisa and Timmy and Peter.
Yeah.
And that was the best times of our lives, at the track and growing up and being there on Saturdays and going down to the lounge and kind of sneaking in to see B and sitting there and talking to B and then seeing Bill come over and pick her up and stuff. And those were great times,